Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachael for Wednesday, the 6th of April, I believe. It's 7th of April. Yes, 7th of April. Sorry, I've got my days all confused. It's just after Holy Week and Easter, I always have a little trouble getting myself back on schedule. I apologize that this morning's Church at Home is being published so late, but it's just been that kind of day. I got up at 6. Things went sideways, so hopefully the rest of the day won't. Today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about spiritual guides and the influences that we have in our lives that help us to figure out who we are and what we're becoming and how we think about God and things like that. So, and I was on my elliptical this morning, and as every day I try to watch something of Primate or Presiding Bishop Michael Curry, who is like my favorite preacher of all time, an Episcopal priest who knows how to preach really, really well. And as I watched him on YouTube on my iPad, and as I'm working on the elliptical, I really don't have my hands free to change things. So my YouTube very graciously, when one thing ends, it suggests another video, and so you just choose play now or not. So I usually just hit with my knuckle the play, and it pops up the next video. Now, I don't know how it works, the algorithms and all the stuff in YouTube, but it seems to sort of compile based on what I've watched before, or whoever's watched my iPad. It pulls up things that are of similar interest or things that might spin off from that. So almost every day when I finish watching something of Bishop Curry, when it pulls up another suggested video, it's often either Bishop Curry or another church related thing or something on that topic. So in some ways I got thinking, YouTube has become my sort of virtual spiritual guide during this pandemic. I have lots of books that I can read, and I do read. I've got several on the go all the time, of varying topics and interests, and those are awesome. But when we are such a virtually connected world, and a lot of the time I spend first thing in the morning is I can either stare at the wall. And I've tried praying while on the elliptical, and the only prayer I can come up with was, God, I just want to stop. So I need something that's more distracting than that. So I watch my iPad and I watch the YouTube videos that pop up. And Michael Curry is a great, his energy is, as someone said today when I was watching, he's like a locomotive train. He begins a sermon and he just sort of starts, but then he picks up steam. And by the time he gets a couple minutes into it, you're charging along with him. He's chugging down those tracks. And his topics are always about Jesus and the movement of the Jesus movement and the call that we're to love people. So it's a good way to start the day. So, but YouTube just sort of picks the next thing. Sometimes it's had some real humdingers, especially if Rob's been watching my iPad and it changes up the algorithm. I end up watching things about conspiracy theories or how to do the detailing on a USS Arleigh Burke or something model that he's been working on. But for the most part, YouTube does a pretty good job of analyzing the things that I have shown an interest in and then heading me off on those tangents on things that I maybe wouldn't have looked for or known to look for before. And I find that really helpful. I've been listening to Bishop Curry talking about the politics in the United States lately, as he was going and preaching at conventions, so synods we would call them, or at missions where people were seeking opportunities as a diocese to really come together and be fired up and to go out into the world to share the good news of Jesus Christ and ask Bishop Curry to be their guest speaker, things like that. It's good to have someone, or in this case something, that helps to keep you on a direction and sometimes offer a different idea, a different opportunity, or something that you wouldn't have sought out for yourself to guide you in that. And so I am surprised. A year ago, I would never have guessed I'd be saying that YouTube could possibly be a help to my own spiritual growth. It's amazing the things this pandemic has given us as gifts, isn't it? So what about you? Where does God find ways in your life, in your circumstances, to help you find your spiritual guide. What are the things that you use or that God uses for you, with you, to discover how you are called to, what you're called to do next, or what you're called to think on, to study, to pray about? Maybe it's a neighbor or a friend, someone close to you that may or may not be Christian, somebody who makes you think, someone who calls out of you thoughts that you maybe didn't know that you could have yourself. It's always wonderful to have some kind of a spiritual friend. But that spiritual friend doesn't always have to be spiritual themselves. Sometimes God works, like YouTube, through interesting and different ways that are unexpected to help us to know what we're called to do, what we're called to pray for, even what we're called to read or think about. Who do you have in your life? Name off some people that you can think of that maybe are folks that would acknowledge that they are intentional about being spiritual minded in your life, or people who would be so surprised if you said, by the way, did you know that you have an impact on my life every day, or once a week, or even just once? We all have that person, like the teacher. You can go back and say, like Mrs. Scott. Brenda Scott was my teacher in grade 1 at Locks Elementary School in St. Thomas, Ontario. And she was phenomenal. Mrs. Scott she was so comfortable, I even called her mom once in a while, just by accident. But she was a great teacher. She taught us about public speaking by using a stand that her husband built out of wood and a tin can that she called her microphone, and we get up and share our something about give and tell. No, I can't remember. You can think of it for me. What do you call that when they kids stand up and there's something and tell? Not talk and tell, but you know what I mean. Where we share something, maybe what we did for the weekend, or a favorite animal we have, like a stuffed animal or something like that. Share and tell. Share and tell. That was what it was called. Mrs. Scott changed my life, and she may never know that. I did run into her later in life when I was working at the bank and going through university, and she looked so different, but that didn't make any difference because she really had a huge impact on my life, even though she had no idea who I was, 20 years later. But there are those people in our lives that they really do give us direction, and they maybe not intentionally, they just something they say, something they suggest, something that they do makes us think something, and we're often running on our next spiritual tangent, learning something about ourselves, about God, about who we are. What about books that you've read? What about your public library, or the people that you borrow books from? That can be an incredible gift, finding people who know what you like and can suggest new ideas to you. When we were living in Borden at CFB Borden, there was a library on base for the military, but it was also had a really good section for the families and for anybody. And there was a retired captain who ran the library, and he was phenomenal. I would go in, and I always took out things that were, sort of military based. I love war history, like the history of military and things like that. And I got interested in reading the Somalia report, the document that was commissioned by the government after everything that happened so badly in Somalia. And I read all 6 volumes and the appendices. I have no one to talk to about it, though, but it was an interesting, very powerful read about how things went militarily, government-wise, all of those things. Not your average coffee table, book, but interesting reading. I also started reading some French books while I was there, and learned about a couple new authors like Camilla Lackberg I think she's from Norway, and her works are translated. But I would go into the library, and after a couple of weeks, I go in probably once every 2 weeks. After a couple of visits, I noticed that the captain he'd suggest something to me. He would be, have you read this, both on the military side, but also on the fiction and nonfiction side? I saw this come across the counter, and I held it over for you because I thought you might be interested in this. He said it all the time. Even when Robbie was coming to visit for the summer, he learned that the first time that Robbie came, Robbie took out books on horses. And 6 months later at March break, when Robbie came back and we went to the library, we got there and this librarian ran over and pulled out a book he thought that Robbie would be interested in. And it made Robbie's whole week that this captain, this librarian, would remember him and would go and search something out for him. It's very powerful for us when somebody thinks highly enough of us that he'll remember and they'll keep us in mind for something. What other ways are there in our lives? Maybe it's music. Your playlist on your phone or your radio, the things that you choose to listen to, the playlist that you have that leads you into a contemplative space or a prayerful space, things that are influencing us, whether we realize it or not, and calling us to continue to grow. That's my challenge for you today, is to look around in your life and see where those librarians or neighbors or YouTube influencers are in your life that help you to find some spiritual direction, that help you to focus on where you're going, or maybe encourage you to try something a little bit different on your spiritual path. Give it a try. And if you want to, try watching YouTube and figure out what does your algorithm call out for you to watch. You might be surprised at how useful such things can be. Have a great day. God bless you. I promise I'll have Church at Home for tomorrow up and running prior to 10 o'clock in the morning. God bless everybody. Have a beautiful day. Enjoy the sunshine. Know that you are loved and love others by wearing your mask and getting your vaccine. God bless. I'll see you tomorrow.